We are going to be talking about our topic today is You Were Born for These Times, How to Find Peace of Mind in Very Turbulent Times. We have lots of very good questions, but if any others occur to you, just put them into the chat box. The very first question that was asked was actually commenting on something they'd heard me say earlier, and I want to start there. No, much of my understanding of both where we are now in world events and where we're going has been formed not only from common sense observation of what's going on, but also from the fact that Paramhansa Yogananda, author of Autobiography of a Yogi, who's the source of everything that I offer you, through his disciple Swami Kriyananda. So with all those names spoken, Yogananda was very explicit and actually sometimes terrifyingly explicit about the state of the world in 1950 and what he anticipated was going to happen. He wasn't looking at the news and the politics. He was talking about much bigger cosmic cycles in which the civilization, the energy level of planet Earth is elevating, and therefore the consciousness of everyone who incarnates here, those who choose to incarnate are coming in because there's a different kind of energy that's going to be possible here. But the transition, he said, would be, and self-evidently is, very turbulent and will get worse. The result is positive, the reasons are positive, but the transition process is going to be difficult. I've always been a little bit outside of the mainstream in the way I think. It was partly the family that I was raised in and just the way I was born. So it's not like I've ever depended on popular culture or anything like that for my understanding of things. So here, in getting involved in these teachings, hearing Kriyananda talk, hearing Master talk about world wars, about world depression, about food shortages, climate change, all the things that we're seeing now, I was a little pessimistic, and dropping out, moving to a community in my early 20s and having spent all my life now within the life of a spiritual community, pioneering a way of life for the future that is still a tiny minority in this present. What I'm getting to is I've been a little pessimistic about things. And about 10 years ago, Swami Kriyananda gave me the assignment. He called me Ananda's global ambassador and told me to travel as much as I could. Took me a while to get organized, but in the last few years, I've really been in a lot of different countries and I've met a lot of different people. And very interestingly, the more I travel, the more people I meet, the more cheerful and optimistic I get. Not on any political level or in terms of world events. And I have no reason to doubt the prophecies that Yogananda made. In fact, because I'm traveling, I also have become more and more persuaded that everything he's saying is very, very likely to happen. You just see the karmic forces in place, and they're much too strong. But simultaneously, and this is also what Yogananda and Kriyananda emphasized, what's happening is that our society is polarizing. And yes, you can look at it as a political polarization, which is also true. But the fundamental polarization is those who are still clinging to a materialistic concept of life and reality and what I can get for myself, and those who are understanding that we are part of a greater reality and divine attunement is the solution to everything that ails us. This is also fundamental to what Yogananda said about the cycle that planet Earth is in right now. We have become, as a civilization, utterly materialistic. But organized, traditional, institutional, dogmatic, ours is the only way, religion is also losing adherence and is not the future, is not the way that this turbulence will be resolved. What is needed, and Yogananda spoke this way. He said, self-realization is the religion of the future, and he did not mean self-realization as Yogananda presents it, as Ananda presents it, not at all. Self-realization meaning inner spiritual understanding of our own divine nature and our relationship to God and light and love and compassion, all of these things. And the society is polarizing. People are becoming extremely materialistic and self-centered and power-oriented and greedy and bigoted. And people on this side are discovering the power, the freedom, the resolution of all these conflicts. It begins with the human heart. And everywhere I go in the world, Japan, South Africa, Estonia, of course, the European countries, Germany, England, France, um, the Bahamas, everywhere I go, there are so many people who are understanding the power, how to create a positive future. And I don't just mean the people who come to my talks, because of course that's lovely, who are really actively engaged and interested in exactly the same things I am. I just mean walking down the street, simple things like organic food, the power of veganism, um, a sort of joyful self-expression as in compassionate ways, a disinclination, a repudiation of too much luxury, a simple desire to share. You know, according to Yogananda's prophecies, the lifestyle of intentional spiritual communities, particularly, which I've been engaged in for a long time, but all of the implications of self realization being the goal of life. We are one with the infinite. We are here to realize that truth. We are here to share that divine love with others. That's the grassroots energy that's coming up. You know, when we were in, it was probably Lithuania actually, where actually in every country that I've been in, we find excellent vegan restaurants. And that may sound like a small thing, but think how many steps there have to be in awakening to get all the way to veganism and for there to be culture in all over the world where you can actually make a good living on the basis of offering vegan food. That's what I mean by the optimism. And oh, and one of my favorites was just a group of people just all over the world now, and every day they exchange beautiful photographs of clouds. It's the Little Cloud Society. And somehow that touched me the most in certain ways because we are waking up. And whereas I used to be quite pessimistic, and in an external sense, I think a lot of hard things are going to happen, but the human heart is responding. And that's what it's all for, and that's what victory really looks like. Okay, next question.
Okay, thank you so much, Asha. So we have a lot of questions. This is Ashani over here behind the scenes. So the first question is, I see what people are doing and the choices that they're making in the world, and it makes me angry.
Hmm.
How can I be more understanding towards people?
Well, it, what happens to us, what the outer circumstances of our lives are there to show us what the inner climate is really like. And if we see things that we don't like and then our inner climate becomes angry, then we are literally contributing to the vibrations that are creating the chaos in the first place. The line that you have to find somehow within yourself is because it doesn't serve to comfort yourself with an untruth. To say, oh, everything is just fine, and these evil people doing these terrible things. Well, they just have to do them. That's just foolishness. As Sri Yukteswar in Autobiography says, spirituality is not dumbness. It makes you more clear. It makes you more confident. It makes you more powerful. But it also, what we need to understand is that God is in charge. And if I respond to this with anger, which is always based on fear, if fear and anger are what's coming out of me when I'm faced with conditions that don't meet my idea of what they ought to be, then I am just adding those negative vibrations, increasing the polarization. So the fine line, which is extremely difficult in question. Why were we born into this situation? If this is not our natural temperament to live in these ways that we find, and I have to use the word, so repellent, so uncompassionate, so unkind, so power oriented. So what can I get for myself? And it doesn't matter if I hurt you to get it, as long as I get it. These are evil ways of thinking. You have to call it just what it is. So the only possible way to understand this is we have to back way up, and we have to see it from God's point of view. That's why this whole thing is about understanding our relationship to our higher reality. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda writes, Jesus, whose name is well known and we understand the power of Christ, Jesus and Babaji. And Babaji is a deathless master in the Himalayas who's particularly engaged in the spiritual development of planet Earth. Not the planet itself, but the souls that are on it. Jesus and Babaji have planned the spiritual salvation of the age, and the method is internal spiritual growth. Okay, so the question is, why were we born into this situation? This is what we titled it, for this hour was I born. I was born for this. What does that mean to be born for this? What that means is we have karma that we have to face, and we have to resolve, and we have to transcend. And these very challenging, difficult circumstances are exactly the right place to do it. It's very easy to be all, oh yes, God is in charge, everything is according to God's plan, everything happens perfectly, when we live in a world where everything is harmonious and we can keep our little world intact. What happens when these forces of shadow, and I use the word shadow instead of darkness, that's very important, because shadow merely blocks the light. It does not diminish the light. It in no way can conquer the light, but it can block the light. So when all these forces come in that start blocking the light, and difficulty and suffering ensue, do we still believe that God is in charge? I mean, what kind of faith do we have if we only have it if everything goes our way, if He only answers our prayers in the way we want them answered? So we get to find out, oh my gosh, I thought I was a peaceful, loving person, and look at me, I'm enraged. And the relevant point is not what made you enraged, because there are many things that are evil and need to be called out as evil. You can't, as I said, you can't comfort yourself with an untruth. But if you become angry, who are you angry at? And why are you angry? And if you really stop, and that introspection is what is really required. Who am I angry at? Why am I angry? How do I think it's going to help to be angry? What is the anger doing to me? Where did the anger come from? What else am I angry about? Because if you are putting angry vibrations into the universe, you are not solving any problem. And so it's the challenge. Do I want to help, or do I want to contribute to the shadow? Anger contributes to the shadow. Now, you may still wish to stand up with all the strength you have in your heart for something that you think is righteous, whether you do that externally or through the power of prayer, or by making certain that your life is the opposite of what you are angry about. But here's the hard part, and these teachings, my answers to these issues these are not small fixes. These are not, oh yeah, I'll just start doing that affirmation and everything will be fine. No, this is a total transformation of our definition of reality and how we perceive it. If I am a child of God, so is everyone else. If I am eternally loved by God, so is everyone else. If I am being given the opportunity I need to face the karma that I have, to learn the lessons about the nature of reality, what causes suffering, what brings happiness, if God is giving me the chance to learn these lessons, He is giving everyone else the same chance. Divine Mother loves all her children equally. Turbulent times like these are times when I use the word rowdy. Many of Divine Mother's rowdy, naughty children get to be born at this period of time because there's a lot of stuff to be destroyed, and they're going to destroy it. And they're going to behave in ways that are really not wholesome for them and that will not bring them what they think it's going to bring them. But they have the right to find out, just like we have the right to find out. And so they get to run their karma and we get to run ours. Their karma frightens us and makes us angry. Oh my, that means that I have a lot to learn, don't I? Doesn't make them right, but it means I have a lot to learn about acting with the compassion and kindness of the divine and with the power of the divine also to stand up for the light. And then those souls, and of course, as I was saying earlier, this is a whole system. You have to add reincarnation into it. You have to have karma and reincarnation, and you have to have a loving divine God, or else we're kind of in trouble, meaning there are no really good solutions. These people have risen to the level where they have enormous power to influence the whole civilization. They have armies, they have nuclear weapons, they have vast resources, and they're not using them in a way that is really honorable. And they're not using them in a way that's going to really bring them what they're hoping to have. But we only learn from experience. And so this is their time to learn that this is not going to bring them what they want. And this is our time to overcome our belief that the world should conform to our way of wanting it, to deepen our faith in God, and to learn to love everyone as Divine Mother loves us.
Thank you so much, Asha. So the next question is, how can I stay steady and peaceful with all that is happening?
You have to practice all the time. You have to practice all the time. You have to practice when it's easier. You can't just wait till the crisis comes. How do you solve every upset within your consciousness right now? Every upset, whatever it might be, no matter how small it looks, you are making grooves in your consciousness. You are setting a karmic pattern. You are developing habits of response. You are affirming the nature of reality. You are affirming what brings happiness and what brings suffering every minute of every day. Yogananda said, take care of the minutes and the incarnations will take care of themselves. You can't just look at Mount Everest and say, well, how do I get to the top of Mount Everest? I want to get to the top of Mount Everest. You have to start walking around the block, doing 10 minutes of exercise a day. So these and the probability of increasingly challenging conditions in our life, in our lifetime, has to act now as a tremendous incentive to build the muscles of faith and compassion and courage and calmness and perseverance. Just name all the virtues. And we have to practice all of them all the time as much as we can, because as things escalate, we will need to have those muscles in place. You can wait until it's a matter of sheer survival, but that would be very unwise. Do you have a spiritual practice? Do you study and try to think philosophically? Do you look at situations in life and try to see it from Divine Mother's point of view? Are you dedicated to being an instrument of light? Do you justify and excuse your limitations? Or do you honestly face them calmly without guilt or self-censure, but just, oh, look, I have things to work on. Let me get to work as best I can. That's what, in the 1980s, Swami Kriyananda went on a tour through much of the Western United States, and his topic was building spiritual power against troubled times. He had these prophecies of Yogananda from 1950, and all through the 40 years that I knew him, he was always focused on helping us become strong inwardly, because of course that's the whole purpose of our incarnation, but also as a practical anticipation of the need for people of the light to be strong within themselves so that we can actually dynamically help uplift, help comfort, and ultimately help rebuild. But we have to start practicing now. It's as simple as that.
This is actually an interesting question that just came up. They're saying that basically there's always been troubled times.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it different now? There's there's always, what's the difference between now and always?
I think that's a very good question. What's different about now? There's always been trouble on planet Earth. Yeah, in fact, there always has been trouble on planet Earth. It's called the human condition. The mistake that we make, we're born onto this planet, we find ourselves here, and we immediately make decisions about how it's supposed to be. This is supposed to be easy, this is supposed to be calm, this is supposed to be happy, this is supposed to be nice, but that's not why we're here. We are in school, and we are here to learn the true nature of reality and what brings happiness and what causes suffering. And so planet Earth has always been a school in which we get to learn our unlearned lessons. Um, uh, Kriyananda asked Yogananda at one point, do souls always incarnate on the same planet? Do we always come back to Earth? Yogananda actually laughed at that, at the preposterousness of that idea. Oh, no, he said, there are countless inhabited planets. He said, if you came back to the same one every time, as he put it, you would learn too fast, which doesn't really make a lot of sense from our point of view, but we have lots of different experiences. And all of these different planets in creation go through, have different contexts, different levels of awareness, different refinement or grossness or harmony or warlike energy. And from the astral world, we choose the environment. We are drawn to the environment, which includes the planet, the family, the country, the culture, the time, that will give us the opportunity to finish whatever karma we have, whatever we don't yet understand, that we need to understand in order to liberate ourselves from delusion and embrace our true nature as manifestations of the divine. As it happens, the planets follow a solar system within a galaxy. The center of the galaxy is a source of enormous energy. These are ancient Indian traditions that have also been part of many previous, more enlightened cultures. The center of the galaxy radiates an enormous amount of energy. Our solar system, it moves on an elliptical orbit, which moves us closer and farther away from that energy center. The closer we are to that energy center, the more energized and enlightened the planet is. But then we reach the closest point, and then we begin to travel away from it. And so this planet itself has seen higher and lower ages of enlightenment. And that enlightenment happens on all levels, including technology. This is the so-called myth, but the story of Atlantis, of a highly technically advanced age. This is the evidence of the pyramids, which even today, no one can figure out how they built them. But if we postulate the possibility that they had more higher, subtle ways of working and influencing the material world, then much is possible, just as we have seen how all of these technological advances are just one after another coming to us. And according to this system, which in India is still a little bit confused, but Yogananda and his line of gurus have clarified this. And each of these ages is called a yuga, Y-U-G-A. There's an excellent book called The Yugas, written by Joseph Selby and David Steinmetz, available through Crystal Clarity Publishers. There's also a number of um, classes and conversations on my YouTube channel and others about this phenomenon. If you can understand this, it's very helpful. We are moving out of an age where matter is the defining reality. We are moving into the age of energy. After energy comes the power of thought. After the power of thought comes the power of spirit. Then it crests and begins to go down again. These transition periods are especially turbulent. It is a rising age, which is why after this period of turbulence, things will be better. But still, it's still going to be the human planet. It's still going to be all of Divine Mother's children coming here to learn lessons. And even though the age we're moving into, which is called energy, is more advanced than the age we're coming out of, Kali, which is the age of matter, it is not heaven, it is not paradise, it's still the material plane, and a whole lot of this technology is not used for good, it's still used for evil. War continues, In fact, in some ways, it's more insecure because now they can just send the drones out, and just find anybody anywhere. So that is the nature of the planet. You're absolutely right. To say that things are getting better doesn't mean that they're ever going to be really, really good. They're going to be just a little less gross. I mean, when Jesus was crucified, Jesus wasn't the only one who was crucified. And if you know anything about the Bible, he had a thief on either side of him, and they were both crucified with him. They were crucified on the public highway, and many, many people were crucified. Just like, you're on your way out to the grocery store, and as you go down the street, people are being crucified on the sides of the road next to you. That was the common civilization at that point. And it's unthinkable to us now. And then the entertainment was throwing Christians to the lions. Thousands of people would come to watch the Christians be eaten by the lions. I mean, it's unthinkable, but we still play very rough sports. We're fascinated now with all these gladiator contests, all these warriors who fight one another. We still are spending vast amounts of money to create war machines and so on. So, we're a little more advanced, but there's a lot of vegan restaurants, even in, all kinds of places in the world, because consciousness is rising, and at the same time, it's just not paradise. So yeah, welcome to the story. But transitions like this, especially from matter to energy, um, are very, very turbulent. We're on a rise, but all of this fixed way of thinking, in which religions are separate, races are separate, languages are separate, countries are separate, everything is all fixed. Matter is fixed. I mean, my little box and my cup are two different things, but science and all of religion tells us this is really just energy. And even though it doesn't appear, it's more subtle and different than it seems. But that's a very unwelcome thought to people who are still committed to that way of doing it. So nations are still fighting nations, and races are fighting races, and people are trying to oppress each other for foolish reasons. I mean, all of these things are still there, and they're going to still be there, but it'll get a little bit better.
Thank you so much, Asha. This next question is, I have lost my ability to meditate in these upsetting times. Do you have any advice on how to quiet my mind?
Yes. This is the whole point. I mean, these are upsetting times. So, yeah, great. You can meditate when you're alone in the forest, but to be able to actually contact the inner worlds when times are difficult, that is the whole point. So you are right at the edge of why you were born. And what are the suggestions? First of all, you don't have to pay a lot of attention to the outer world. It'll take care of itself. I mean, are you watching the news? Are you avidly thinking about all the hard things that are happening? What kind of an environment are you creating for yourself? How do you spend your time? What materials do you read? What music do you listen to? What kind of conversations do you have with your friends? What kind of friends do you have? What kind of diet do you follow? Or do you exercise regularly? Are you listening to uplifting music? Are you going onto the internet to find out what terrible catastrophe happened all over the planet this day? Or are you finding the extraordinary resources there of spiritual teaching, spiritual music, spiritual dance, beautiful art? When you sit to meditate, you bring into it everything that you have gathered during the course of that day. So what are you gathering? What are you gathering? And if you feel, well, I'm too agitated, well, then you need to immerse yourself in vibrations that are calming. If you have the opportunity to meditate with other people, that would be a very powerful way to help you get settled, to do more yoga postures or do more wholesome exercise or do more wholesome activities. That would be a good way to start. But you need to start really studying an alternative way to think about life instead of just reading the news day after day. I read very little about it because at one, it doesn't take much to know, but those images just imprint themselves on your mind. So if you find yourself agitated, you're not helping anything. Merely to be informed of all the reasons why you should be upset, and then being upset just makes you part of the problem. You A far better service is to know very little or nothing about the details of what's going on. If taking a fast from all that bad news will allow you to be an actual calm instrument of light. So it's a choice. And that's why we were born. Why we were born for these times, because what is happening has the capacity to steal our inner peace. It has the capacity to upset our focus on higher, more beautiful realities. It also has the opportunity for us to become powerful warriors for the light. But you don't become that passively. You don't get strong by going into the gym and just lifting 5 ounces every time you go in. You have to keep increasing the weight, and our soul is increasing the weight on our peace of mind and challenging us to find a deeper experience within ourselves that will give us the faith and the calmness we need. So wherever you're standing, just try to do a little bit better, and then do a little bit better and a little bit better. Build on your successes. Don't try to take such a gigantic leap that you're just going to fall back from it. If you can't meditate an hour, meditate a minute. If you can't stop watching the news all the time, cut it back by 5 minutes. If you get restless, if you're trying to read spiritual things, read one page. You see what I mean? Just build on what you can, because you need to build spiritual power against troubled times. Otherwise, we will not be able to stand.
Thank you, Asha. The next question, and there's a few in this series. If everything is karmic, does that mean injustice is meant to be?
Well, you see, injustice from what point of view? Yes, everything is karma, absolutely. Karma is cause and effect. Human actions have consequences. Actions from one incarnation carry to the next. We are on a long saga to learn our true nature as children of God, to be able to access that divine power, to be able to be instruments of light, to help others also understand their true nature. So injustice means that a person is, injustice. Let me hold this for a second. There is no such thing as injustice, in the sense that everything happens for the ultimate enlightenment. Is there enormous suffering along the way? Yes. Does it happen that people seem to get away with bad things in the short-term picture? Yes. Do good people always come out on top in the short-term one lifetime that we're watching? No, they don't. Is everybody loved equally by Divine Mother? Are each of us here to have the opportunity to grow, to change, to transcend limitations, to embrace infinity? Yes. Is the process to doing that smooth, easy, and self-evident on the short-term basis that we're looking? No. This is why we have to just shift our whole point of view. You can't just sort of take this little tiny picture of a very limited cause and effect in this one incarnation, impose upon it how we want things to be, and then call that wisdom. It just isn't. And the reason, what wakes us up to go deeper, to try harder, to think differently, to be courageous, is because the other systems don't work. It's just as simple as that. Just like, how is that working for you? And if it isn't working for you, you can just collapse in despair and cynicism and atheism, or you can ask a much deeper question. Is there another answer? That's the process.
Thank you, Asha. The next question is, what should I do if the people I care about are consumed by fear, anger, or misinformation?
The only way you're going to be able to change them is vibrationally, with the power of love and the grace of God. If they're not interested in what you have to say, don't say it. But if you can become a true friend and a comforter to them, then you will be able to do much more good. I've had the opportunity on a number of occasions to be present when people were transitioning out of their body, when people were dying. And in most cases, I was in an atmosphere that was receptive to what I've had to offer, but not always. I've been invited into situations by one person, perhaps the dying person, perhaps not the dying person. But and nobody wants to hear my philosophy of life or listen to the music that I would offer or have me pray outwardly or anything like that. But I have discovered that if I'm simply calm, kind, sympathetic, and unafraid, then I can contribute enormously without doing anything more than just sitting in the room. So you have to change your concept of what can really help people. And so if they're all that way, then you have to be different than that. You know, my own mother, bless her heart, she was a very sweet woman, and toward the end of her life, she never really understood what I've been doing with my life, but we had a fine relationship. But at the very end, she said, like this, "I don't know why," she said, "but I just like having you around." And then she sort of glanced off to the over to the corner of the room and said, "Maybe it's because of what you're doing." You know, that was as far as we ever got. But she felt it, you see, because what I've done with my life made me capable of radiating to her uh, some of the power and presence of God. And she didn't know what it was or didn't even want to know, but she could feel it. So don't ever underestimate the power of your vibration, the power of your consciousness, and the power of your prayer. Divine Mother, whatever it is you're trying to teach these people, help them to learn it. Just as simple as that. Help them to learn it.
Thank you so much, Asha. I'm kind of combining two questions here. I struggle to understand the harm that humans cause animals or innocent children. Could you explain this from a spiritual perspective?
I struggle to understand the harm that humans impose on you, innocent animals and on children too. I'm not repeating the question. I mean, I'm repeating the question because, yeah, that's it. That's the question, isn't it? I mean, everywhere I go in the world, if it's not the first question, it's the second. What about the suffering children? Yeah, there's a lot about this world that's really horrific. And I mean, I can, and I will spin some stories for you here, but it's heartbreaking. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. But it drives us in two directions. It drives us to despair and atheism, or it drives us to say, what is really going on here? And you have to step way back, and it's very challenging to step way back. This world is not meant to be comfortable and easy. This is a place that we come to learn hard lessons. Suffering is often one of the most powerful ways that we learn. And I can't look at, I mean, a group of children and tell you what the karma is that brought them to that. But very often the worst suffering that we see from our perspective that looks more like punishment than reward is actually the finishing of some final shreds of karma, the most powerful incentive to really ask deep questions. A woman came to me once, and her sister had died, and they had been just as close as could possibly be. They'd planned to have live their whole lives together. She died young of cancer. And this is the way the woman explained it to me. When my sister died, I suffered as I have never suffered before. Because I was suffering so deeply, I prayed as I had never prayed before because there was nowhere else for me to turn. As a result of the power of my prayer, I had experiences of God that I didn't even know were possible. And then as a result of that, and then she said all the positive things that she'd been able to do with her life starting from that. So I said, so was the death of your sister a tragedy? You know, it's very hard to say because look at all the good that came from it. And the sister didn't get to finish her life in the way that she thought she was going to, but we don't die. We don't die accidentally. We die because the karma of this incarnation in this body is over. And the way that we die is appropriate for our karma, not so that we feel good in the moment, but so that we learn what we have to learn. And sometimes we very courageously take on enormously difficult incarnations because we're ready for that kind of challenge. And how do we know? How do we know? From just looking from the outside. You have to go deep. And this is why these things happen because they force us to think more deeply and creatively than we would otherwise, to pray with a power that we would never have brought to the occasion if we weren't motivated by the suffering of ourselves or the suffering of others. Yeah, it's a challenging story. There's no other answer.
And the animals?
Animals are a little bit more complicated. An animal Animals are individual souls and their personalities, and they evolve through specific incarnations. This is how Yogananda explains it. Evolution through, okay, we evolve through different forms and different incarnations, and we manifest a body in a circumstance that has the capability of expressing the fullness of whatever consciousness we have developed. If you're a clam in a shell, attached to a coral reef, then your opportunity for experience is quite limited. If you're a monkey in the jungle, you can taste all these different fruits, you can run all over, you can play naughty games, you can do all kinds of things. Both are animals, but one animal body has much greater capacity to expand its consciousness than the other animal body does. As it explained in the ancient teachings, animals progress automatically. Even though there's an individual soul present, that soul is not sufficiently developed, nor is the nervous system of the animal body sufficiently developed for the animal to actively, with its own willpower, influence its destiny at the level that a person can, a human body can. So we evolve through many, many animal stages, getting more and more sophisticated animal bodies until we have evolved to the point where we can have a human body. And then from that point, we have an element of choice. We have an element of able to influence. So the animals are going through all of this, even though the animals have emotion and they do suffer. A great deal of suffering is the capacity that the human mind has to objectify the suffering and to protest against its happening and to judge that it's unfair. An animal may feel the pain, but they don't have all those added complex layers. They don't have anxiety about dying. They don't worry about what's going to happen to the puppies if I die. They don't think about the fact that, why are you treating me so unkindly? I did nothing to deserve it. I mean, if you think about human suffering, all of those elements are in it. Yes, the animal suffers, but they suffer in a far less personal way. It's just something that happens that does not justify it. And when humans are involved in activating that suffering, the human does not get good karma for doing that and will have to face the consequences of imposing suffering. But why does it happen? Yes, that is the hard question, isn't it? Every saint, every master says when we elevate our consciousness to the point of seeing it in a more impersonal, from a divine perspective, we realize that it's all happening in a harmonious way for our own freedom. And no saint or master who ever achieved that level of God realization said that it was wrong. In the meantime, my goodness, it's a powerful motivator, isn't it? Never to be an instrument of suffering for others. I mean, we cause others to suffer because we forget that we are one with all that is, and we try to protect ourselves in some way, or we try to say, well, if I can pass the suffering on, then I'll have less. Of course, that's a foolish thought, but that's what we do. I hurt inside. I'm going to make you hurt, and then somehow that's going to reduce the hurt in me. It doesn't work. So we try it, and we try it again and again until finally we notice, after many incarnations, this is not bringing me what I want. We ask deeper questions about what causes happiness, what causes suffering. And in the meantime, as we're evolving, it's very, very challenging. But that heartbreak is the incentive to become an instrument of light and ease heartbreak, and also to change my own consciousness because this is unbearable. That's the best I can say.
Thank you so much, Asha. And this will be our last question. Why do you say we were born for these times?
Because the soul is conscious and we operate on multiple levels. The level of awareness that we call ourselves, that we are in most of the time, is the spark of divinity that is in us has become identified with limitation. The limitation of the material world, of the single human mind, of being just in one body, of having only one language. Everything that we just think of as me is actually very limited. This is just a tiny part of myself. This me attached and defined by this body is the most compressed aspect of my consciousness. I have a continuous consciousness that goes all the way to God realization, but I don't realize that. That's why we use the word realize. It's already there, but I don't realize it. People who have near death experiences and come back tell us, this is not what it seems. You are not what you seem. Masters and saints say, this is not what it seems. You are not what this seems. But so we're operating at all times on multiple levels, and we're only conscious for the most part of the most compressed. But that doesn't mean we're not being influenced and guided. It's just like a marionette. There's something pulling the strings, but the marionette seems to be moving. And the marionette may think that's all that it is, and then it suddenly realizes that someone is pulling the strings. That's us. That's what spiritual growth is to realize that someone is pulling the strings, that I'm part of a greater reality. And when we're outside of this body and we're just in our astral form, in our energetic self, we are more aware. We are by no means enlightening. Mere death does not free you of all the karmic limitations, but it changes things a little bit. And we have this astral vacation where we get to live in a world that is, well, it's not necessarily, it's different than this one, but if you're a dark evil person, you're still a dark evil consciousness. You just have it on an astral plane. But those who are, well, all of us actually, in when we when we have finished with our astral karma, or we've experienced it as much as we're able to at this time, and the material karma makes us restless to get back into a material body, in harmony, and how conscious this decision is depends on how conscious we are. In harmony with our guides and our angels, we move into the situation that's going to help us to learn our next lesson. If the soul is not that much aware, then the forces more or less happen to it, but it finds itself. It's a harmonious divine plan, and this is the challenge, to understand that it is. So we choose this because what the soul really wants is to grow. What the limited egoic identified self wants is ease and pleasure. What the soul wants is to grow. And so the soul takes us to where we need to be in order to grow. And then we forget that we made that decision. And then we start, the ego identified self wants ease and pleasure, and it feels really betrayed and upset. Then we die. And if we have a death and return experience, we come out of our body and we get, oh my gosh, it was a whole different game than the game I thought. And then we come back in, and if we're fortunate, we start playing the right game. And there's magnificent stories about people for whom that exactly happens. So they do the whole thing fast without losing the body permanently. The rest of us lose the body permanently. That one is done. We hang out in the astral world. Then we pick up the assignment and we come back and do it again. It's a great story, and it's confirmed by a lot of great ancient and modern sources. And if you are really interested, it's worth exploring. Trust me, it changes everything. Okay? God bless you, my friends.